Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Welsh, president of Film Independent. Welcome to Film Independent Presents. I'm very excited to be here today to have a conversation with the cast and filmmakers behind the great new film, 7 Days. Before we get started, just a couple quick thanks from Film Independent. We want to thank our lead sponsor of Film Independent Presents, the HFPA, and also our partner in crime, Vision Media, without whom none of this would be possible. Thank you so much to both of you for your support. With that, I'm really excited to talk to this group. We have a big group of people. Let me begin by introducing them. The writer and director, Roshan Sethi. Roshan, thank you for being here. The co-writer and actor, Karan Soni. The producer, Liz Cardenas. Spirit Award nominated producer for the John Cassavetes Award for Never Going Back, I want to mention. So happy to have you here. Another actor and EP on the film, Geraldine Viswanathan. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name somewhat correctly. Calling in from Australia. Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, you all know him as Mark Duplass, but following this movie, I will only think of him and address him as Daddy. Mark Duplass. Amazing Daddy.
Thank you.
Well, you all, thank you so much for being here and congratulations on the film. I really loved it. It's so fresh and unexpected and unpredictable. I mean, to start, Roshan, do you want to talk about, well, you and Karan wrote the script together. Can you talk a bit about sort of where were you in your lives when you decided to write this? How long ago was it? What was the writing process like? And what was your sort of initial inspiration?
Yeah, well, I'm a physician, but also a screenwriter, and I had been writing for all of residency, and I'd written many, many movies, and none of them had gotten made, and I was feeling increasingly frustrated with that. And then when COVID hit, it seemed like nothing would ever be made, and Karan was separately feeling a similar frustration because the show he was on had been postponed somewhat indefinitely. Both of us felt creatively sort of vacant. And we decided together that we wanted to write something and then take the even bolder step of making it. So we wrote the script in 5 days and then sent it to Mark. And the rest is history.
Wow.
But Mark and Karan, as I'm sure they'll talk about, go way back. So yeah.
So wait, but I want to hone in on the 5-day angle here. You wrote the script. I mean, this must have been an idea you'd been toying with or mentally thinking about for some time. I mean,
yeah. Well, actually, oddly enough, I initially my notion was, I think, so much worse than what Karan made it into. But I just thought, let's just make a contained movie with 2 people, and it can be just like a rom-com, sort of a generic rom-com. But Karan had the idea of making it so specific to our culture and bringing an arranged marriage and the dating websites that so many of our relatives are on. And so it kind of evolved out of a conversation, but that conversation began like literally 3 days before we wrote the script. It wasn't like months of pre-contemplation. We felt an itch, so.
And was the idea from the beginning for Karan to star in it? Were you making something like thinking, okay, who do we know? Who can we work with immediately?
Yeah, that was definitely, he was just trying to get me to shut up about not working as an actor. So, that was helpful with that. Yeah, I think we just kept thinking, before Duplass was involved, ironically, we would have these conversations like, how would Duplass make this? And we're like, we gotta be simple. So like, I'll act in it too, and then we'll use like some other actor friends, and like, we'll just make it, and it's all about just trying to make something. And then we ended up having Duplass involved, and it made the whole process so much easier because we were going in pretty like blissfully ignorant about what it's like to make a movie at this level and during COVID. And our initial like sort of idea was like, we'll just put together some money and shoot it on a phone. And we could have done that version, but I'm glad we did this version. And we sort of learned so much from this experience, because one of the things that Duplass was really good with too was like, they were like, you're going to be involved with every single step. So from like literally the ground up. So we were able to get like a film school education in like independent filmmaking. So
wow, amazing. So Geraldine, you're based in Australia. So I don't know if were you here at the time when this was coming together, or how did you get involved in the project?
I was in New York, and they sent me the script and I read it
immediately because I had nothing to do. And this was in like August. Oh no, July. It was like deep pandemic. And I just fell in love with it. And I knew that if anyone was gonna pull this off, it would be Karan and Roshan. So I was like, I think I'm gonna get on a plane. I don't know how. I think I'm gonna wear a beekeeper's suit or something. I was like, we're just gonna dive in, and yeah, and we did, and it worked out. And but it was wild. It was really, it was bizarre, and it was a scary time to travel, but it was worth it, clearly.
So I understand you and Karan have worked together previously. So you had sort of an on-screen relationship that I'm sure came in handy when you were getting to doing a low-budget film together.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was on top of we were writing it for Geraldine the whole time. That was one of our other little discussions before, and we just kept getting excited thinking about her saying a lot of these lines and being in these scenes. And then when she agreed to do it, it was incredible for multiple reasons, but also because we made this movie in 8 shooting days in middle of a heat wave in Palm Springs. It was 124 degrees the day we shot exteriors, and there was no trailer, there was no comfort. So it's always nice when you have a shorthand with the person you're already working with, because otherwise I think me and Roshan would spend the entire time just apologizing to whichever actress was there and just being like, did she sneak out in the middle of the night and like leave? But it was like, with Geraldine, like maybe she'll warn us before she bails on this endeavor. But it would have not have been the same if we, I think, didn't know each other.
So, I mean, your relationship is obviously, it's the film, it's right, it's so central, and it's the joy of watching the film is watching the interplay between the two of you. And I mean, I love how the film is both a rom-com, it's got the meet cute, it's got a lot of the elements of a rom-com, but I feel like it also really subverts the rom-com in really fresh and ways that I just loved. And Geraldine, especially coming from you, like any moment you have to deflate someone's romantic expectations or views of love, or the way you take your first drink, and just like, you play against the rom-com in a way that I'm like, wow, okay, this is a movie I have not seen before. Can you talk about sort of how you approach that and finding your character?
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's not your typical like rom-com heroine where she's like, I'm trying to find love. And I feel like, he's more the idealistic romantic one. And it was fun to play that, just someone who's like really blunt and like realistic about in her expectations of love, to the point where she's like not even really interested in it. I thought that was like really clever writing from these guys, and was really excited to play a kind of rom-com heroine like that.
I mean, just thinking about it, it feels like the movie on one level, it's pure, it is definitely a COVID movie. You made it during COVID, you reference what's going on in the world, but, and it forces them into this confinement together. But aside from that, I feel like this movie has nothing to do with COVID. It's about people stripping away the layers of inauthenticity that they live by and under. And, it's, I mean, the basic question about marriage and relationships has nothing to do with COVID. You could have made this at any time, which I really, again, I love that about the film. But I also felt like in terms of how you dealt with COVID, I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, but what were the challenges when you were in production, aside from the heat and the low budget aspect of it? I mean, you were, what month did you make this? Was it September?
September, yeah. And the biggest challenge was testing. Because of the limited budget, it became a huge percentage of the budget just to test everyone as frequently as we needed to. We did PCR tests on everybody, which was all 11 cast and crew and producers, everyone included, every other day. Because the 72-hour rule was only possible if we tested every other day because of how long the labs were taking then. And in addition to how long the labs were taking, we had to deal with the commute that those tests had to take. So we were in Palm Springs, and we had to order labs that were done in Los Angeles and then ferry them back and forth and deal with these concierge practices that were just then starting to pop up and do testing. And now I think it's also seamless. Back then it was the Wild West. I mean, we were talking to random labs and directly phoning them, and it had different guidelines that were shifting, and
waiting for results the night before, and Roshan's getting like the emails like in the middle of the night, making sure that we can continue filming. But it was also an amazing experience for all of us as a team to really feel like a family. And that's another thing that I know Duplass Brothers really promotes, is this, you know, going away, isolating yourselves, and really having that like creative spirit. And so it kind of worked for us in both the making of the film and then also keeping everyone safe. We were literally like filming in a bubble, not interacting with the world whatsoever, quarantining in advance, having all of our testing in advance. So safety was of the utmost importance to all of us. But then it was also, again, taking a page out of the Duplass playbook and all of their support and encouragement of like, literally make this a family, have that creative team spirit, which I think bled into the film. And it was a magical experience.
So Mark and Liz, how did you get involved? Like at what point, Mark, so Karan said the script came to you. You wrote the script in a handful of days, sent it to you, and then you were on board. But what was it like? What's the backstory here? How did you get involved, and what drew you to the project?
Well, I mean, Karan and I have been friends for a long time. We made Safety Not Guaranteed together, I don't know, 10 years ago. And struck up a friendship then. And since then have expressed a desire to work together in various and sundry different ways. He came in and played a role in Room 104, learned an entire 30-page script in a day and a half, did the entire thing on his own, but it also showed me what he could do as a leading man. And I checked that in the back of my mind, and I wanted to keep that fire burning for him. And then he came and directed an episode of Room 104 with us. And we've been talking for a little while about, when is it going to be the time for Karan and Rashaan to sort of break out and make their first movie. And this was a perfect fit on so many levels, but there was something new here that we hadn't done. Like, we had made some movies in the pandemic, like language lessons that were all, video chat movies, but we hadn't gone on set yet to make something. So this felt different and challenging. And to the guy's point, for those of you who are in the film business, there's a whole workflow now that is established for how to keep people safe during shooting of COVID stuff. But back then we're just making it up. And what I always tell people is like, look, you're going to have to do multiple roles on a set. But what I didn't anticipate was Rashaan, who is also a doctor, became our COVID compliance officer and the director of the film and co-writer. So, the whole time. Amazing. And we had the best one possible. I mean, it was incredible. And he kind of helped develop some of these things that are the protocols we see now. So I got my own lesson in double tasking from them. And, I just knew that like this project was birthed from the very spirit that we birthed things like the puffy chair. And when they called me, it was with the same sense of enthusiasm, deep humility, and desire to go make something. And whenever I see that, I want to be able to support. And so that's when we got, Liz involved, who really was day-to-day on the ground producer, in the trenches with everybody, making the magic happen. Right.
Yeah, another film independent connection. I did the Film Independent Producing Lab years ago, and my mentor was Mel Eslin, president of Duplass Brothers Productions.
Beautiful.
And I was always a huge fan of Mark and Jay and Duplass and what they did, and also Mel. And so I was so honored and grateful that she agreed to be my mentor. And then we got to be close and talked about trying to work together over the years. And then she reached out to me, like Geraldine was saying, like, it's July 2020. It's like hardcore pandemic. And she was like, I don't know where your head's at in terms of like getting back to making movies and being on set. But we've got an amazing project, and we need, like Mark was like saying, a producer to be there on the ground, be creative producer for Rashaan. but also kind of oversee all the logistics. And so I met Roshan and Karan via Zoom and fell in love with them. I read the script, loved the story. I loved how Mark and Mel and the whole team were like supporting this diverse story and these diverse filmmakers. And I thought, if I'm gonna get my feet wet in producing, having a Harvard MD as my director was probably pretty smart. And it was. So it was, it all happened organically, I think, every kind of step of the way, and was a big fan of Karan's as an actor and Geraldine's as an actress, and could totally see them in these roles. And it was both a pure joy, extremely challenging, and also learned a lot in the process.
Could you could you all talk about, I'm really curious about Geraldine's character's apartment, which was like a primary set, and it's such an amazing space. Like, I loved visually, I just loved being in it, and there was like always something to look at and explore. And talk about, what was that, just an apartment you found in Palm Springs, or how did you, what was
really
the
a
size
credit
of it?
credit to Liz for hunting. We had almost decided and picked where we were going to shoot it, which was a place that was much blander than what you saw in the movie. And Liz found this, kept searching, which is very reflective of Liz's personality, and found an Airbnb in Palm Springs that from its pictures didn't look super promising. But we went to the Airbnb, and the place itself was quite boring. But then the lady who showed us the Airbnb said, "Do you want to see my house?" We're like, "Okay." And we walked into the house that you see in the movie, just exactly as it is. All those horses and dust and Americana and paraphernalia. And we were riveted. Not only because it was visually interesting, but because it was like a frontier house with all the Americana, and the idea of doing a story about two immigrants and a very immigrant story inside all of that was just funny and interesting to us.
It was also a 40-acre horse ranch, and there were over 37 horses, a bull, a dozen donkeys who on the first day ate the craft service. They ate plastic, and then they shit everywhere. That was our first day. Then we had to have a PA guard the crafty door. And we had 6 dogs, unlimited cats. There was no number because they were all just feral. And an iguana that was kept in an iguana room, not in a cage. And she insisted it had to be in the house, and it would escape often onto where we were filming. And then our camera operator would lure it away with bananas. And there was no air conditioning in the home, so
I have to say, it did look hot in the home, but I thought that was really good. Like, Geraldine, you were definitely, it was hot.
Yeah. It was crazy. I felt like I was in a fever dream, like going from truly nothingness and being inside and being like, what is life, to being in this insane environment where we're literally melting. I was like, there's no way that this is real.
And the Fenton twins did an amazing job with enhancing that space with the curtains and shears, and so much credit goes to them too. And then Jeremy Mackey, the cinematographer who was also one of the camera operators, just did such an amazing job of bringing that space to life, because it's one place to see it and be in it, but the way he shot it was just incredible.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jeremy's been a collaborator of ours. He's been a gaffer of ours for years, worked on all of our movies with Lynn Shelton from Seattle and Washington. And this was such a great movie where a lot of people were getting their firsts. And it's something I really believe in deeply. If we can ever have a mission statement, it is a lot about giving everybody their first crack. And you see with Roshan and Karan, like, having the chance to write their first script and how passionate they were about it, and really seeing Karan in in a leading man role like this was something that's like a well overdue. And Jeremy Mackey, who moved from gaffer up to director of photography, and giving Liz those reins and saying, you go for it. I'm rarely disappointed by giving somebody that first shot, promoting them, and their enthusiasm and their work ethic always sort of makes up for whatever lack of experience there is, in my opinion. And this film really is just filled with that ethic.
Yeah, absolutely. Karan and Geraldine, another question on sort of your performances. Well, you shot, how many shooting days did you say there were? Eight?
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. So I don't know how many pages you were doing a day, but this is a dialogue driven movie. You guys are just back and forth. How did you, I mean, one, there's just a technical question about how do you do that, right? I mean, obviously you're experienced actors, and you had a rapport, but that's a lot to take on. But beyond that, like a more nuanced question is sort of, there's such an emotional interplay through your dialogue where things are revealed and held back, and there are these pivots. Like, how do you navigate that as performers working under such tight conditions? And I mean, maybe it's also a question for you, Rashaan, in terms of how you were directing them and when you intervened, and what was that interplay like? I think I just asked like 5 questions, but you get what I'm asking.
Well, I can start really briefly and then let them answer about the performance piece, just to say that they had to do 15 to 17 pages of dialogue a day.
Oh my God.
And not only memorize it, but often only have 1 or 2 takes because of the speed with which we were moving. They are both such natural, instinctive performers, never got in their head, did just an incredible job. It was mind-blowing to me because I had never worked so intimately with actors to see what both of them can do, but they're just both so talented.
And they improv'd a great deal too. Like Rosh and I had the hardest time not like laughing by the monitor or crying, because we felt that way many times.
Yeah, my laughs are edited out of the movie. There were many of them.
Wow.
For me, it was really bizarre. Like, I think it was the first time I had like been part of the writing process and then acting those scenes out. So I felt like they were with me for a few months before, but I feel like if this was just like a job that came to me, it would be way more intimidating, just the amount that was happening. But I really, because like you said, it was made during COVID, like I really, during that time in COVID, really thought like I would not work again, because the idea of like film sets coming back when we were like in the summer of 2020, talking about like people staying away from each other, even outdoors, like 6 feet, I'm like, how are we gonna film something on a set? So I really was like, I think this is like all changed forever in a weird way. And then I was like, I don't know if I can still even do this. And then it was just literally the first scene doing it, being like, oh, the joy is back. Like this feels familiar in a time where everything felt like so crazy and new. And every day you're like, oh, this is different now. Get used to it. The actual acting was like, oh my God, this I know how to do. Like this is fun. And this was like a chance to be so creative. And it made me fall in love with acting again in a weird way, as crazy as the whole thing was.
You know, it's funny, Karan, you and I haven't talked about that thing where when you are a co-writer of something and you're an actor in it, it's that much more shameful and embarrassing when you drop one of your lines, which happens to me all the time, because you get a little cocky because you're like, oh, I wrote it and I'm fine. And maybe you don't memorize it as much because you're like, yeah, it's mine. And then you show up and you're like, oh shit, I don't know this as well as I could. I've had that problem before.
Yeah, you can't complain that it's too wordy, because
Yeah.
Your words.
Well, I mean, I want to go back on just the central thing in your performances of that gradually revealing yourselves more. I mean, Geraldine, you reveal yourself pretty fully early on, like you get caught and then you're just like, all the pretense is gone. But then there remains this like playful quality to how you relate to him as he gradually opens up. And Karan, I love this when she's in the hospital and you're having conversations with her mom on the phone, and seeing the evolution of that relationship was just beautiful. And like, again, unexpected, and just showed like a different side of your character where, you know, a different performer or a different script would have had, I could imagine a bad version of that where like you just remain uptight throughout, or, you know, putting on this pretense the whole way. But like the way you gradually crumble and become more yourself, I mean, it was beautiful to watch, really, from both of you. Which leads me to a question that I'd love to hear about how you came to the framing device of the movie, of the real couples at the beginning and end. Where did you find them and how did you film them? I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, well, initially the inspiration came from When Harry Met Sally, and the idea was to film 3 or 4 couples that were scripted with actors and then to intercut them throughout the movie. So exactly what When Harry Met Sally did. But we came up with the better idea in the end of interviewing our own relatives. So all those people in those videos are people who are related to us. One couple is actually Karen's parents, basically the funniest ones, with looking for the tissue, and that's Karen's mom. But then we came up with this notion of doing, at the beginning, setting up the awkwardness of how they first met each other, how little they knew each other, how far of a journey it felt like they had to travel. And then at the very end of the movie, hearing how many years each of them had been married and what they meant to each other. One of the most emotional things for us when we were making the movie was in doing these Zoom interviews, we started asking people who were related to, what do you mean to each other? Which is not a question that you would casually ask any of your relatives. But we asked them and recorded their answer, and it would make us cry and them cry. And there was something so beautiful about, everyone you see in those videos just met as strangers and then built this life together.
I remember early on when you guys brought the script to me, it was great for me to kind of examine my own blind spots about what arranged marriage was, and it's been presented a certain way in media, whether it's either just sidelined or sort of marginalized for joke purposes or whatever that is. And listening to Karan and Rashaan sort of talk about something that I have deeply believed, which is, that love is something that can grow and that you can water and that you can come together. And I've seen it in my own marriage. And I found a connection point to something that I had previously seen as culturally niche or something that I just wouldn't be able to understand. And I loved the core of that. And I think those videos really helped to drive that home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And on a practical note, like the script, we needed more pages.
Yes.
It was very hard to write a movie of just 2 people in one place, and me and Roshan always were like, we don't want it to be boring, and so we were always like thinking, and we're like, we think we've done everything we can do with 2 people in a house, and then we were like, maybe this will help us get some screen time on this movie.
Well, but to that point you just made, it's a very dramatic moment when you leave the house at the end and you're walking down the sidewalk with your little backpack. Like, that was such a great shot, and it's like, oh, we're in the world.
Yep.
When you guys meet and the camera's circling you, like, that was cinematic gold, after being cooped up.
Yeah, that was kind of what Roshan wanted to do. He wanted it to feel like you're finally getting to see the simple things like a tree and the colors of that and the sky, and we got lucky. There was summer, there were fires, there was like a day before where the sky did not look like that, and that was our last day of filming, and then it magically cleared up, and we got a Steadicam operator to drive up for the day and shoot that, and it was very crazy. There were people in the park and we had to shoo them away.
Yeah, one of them was a doctor, and she was like, "You're a doctor?" We talked about medicine, but yeah, I feel like the thing we were thinking about with the ending in a weird way was the end of the pandemic, which is obviously, who knows if that will exist, but the feeling of we'll go outside and we'll lower our masks and we'll see each other, and the emotion of that and how that felt in September 2020, how urgently we wanted that then and how much we want it now, because that was the first of many things we lost in this pandemic, was the connection, the face, all of that. Yeah. So for us, that was the emotion to end on, because it was so much the spirit of the time.
Yeah. I think it'll be really interesting to see how movies from this era play in 5 years. I think they're going to have emotional resonances that we can't even predict now. Because of course we don't know what the world will be like in 5 years, or how, or how we'll look back on this time.
Yeah, I think I wonder that all the time, because we forgot about 1918 somewhere along the way.
Right.
So it did eventually fade. But we wanted to make something that was very true and honest to how we were feeling, for better or for worse. That is what we did.
So I have one last question, which is for you, Rashaan, and I'd love to hear you talk a bit about, so you are a doctor and a filmmaker. Can you just talk, I'm very curious about that, how you balance those, or do you balance them? Where did you start? How did you get into the other one?
I started in medical school, and I really wanted to write. So I started cold calling producers of medical shows, offering myself as a consultant, though I was still in medical school and did not know any medicine. But I told them over like Facebook that I was, willing to offer my medical expertise, and cold called so many people. Finally, one person replied, Amy Holden Jones, who hired me to work on a pilot as a consultant, and eventually helped get my spec script to an agent. Then I got staffed, and I wormed my way into the industry mainly as a writer.
Mhm.
And it wasn't really until this movie that I even thought about actually making something. But like I said at the beginning, I have been writing features for years and have written at this point 15 features. And I didn't get one made until we made it. So it was
Right.
I had no idea that we could just go make a movie. Like, I really wish I had known that. I had always waited for permission and for the call. And I think Karan had a similar feeling too, which I think it's almost worse as an actor in a lot of ways. But for the two of us to feel like empowered and like we could just go out and make it, which we're really grateful to Mark for making us feel that way, was really life-changing.
That's great to hear. I mean, Mark, I'm sure you know this, but and obviously there are other independent filmmakers taking a similar path, but what you've done, what you and Jay have done, and with Mel and the people you work with, and supporting emerging filmmakers coming up, like doing what you did with Puffy Chair and like passing that on, is just really inspiring and so valuable to the film world. It's like, it's like, because yeah, so many people are sitting around waiting for permission or waiting for some big budget authority to say, I bless your project and now you can make it. And it's like, it's a whole different approach when you start from like, we're a couple brothers and we're gonna go make a movie on our own about a puffy chair. And it's beautiful,
Thank you
so
for saying that, and thank you for all of your support through the years and everything that you guys have done. I mean, we saw that. We saw the system you set up and all those awards you give to people, and it as you well know, there's a part of it. Yes, you want to do it to give back, but in the end, it is really so gratifying and uplifting, to get to my age at this point where your priorities start to shift. And I've already sort of climbed the couple of mountains that I assumed would make me happy, which are, getting your own success and telling your own vision. Then you get up there and it's fun for a little while, and then you look around for something more meaningful. And this gives me probably a lot more than I give back. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for what you guys do in the same regard.